Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Straight Up With Steph. Today, for you, I have a returning guest, Anne Rice, and we are talking more about the brain. Back on episode 16, we talked about ways to prevent cognitive decline through sleep and exercise and nutrition. And I wanted to bring her back today because there's so many other things to talk about when it comes to brain health. I wanted to talk about things that impact the brain that maybe we don't know about. So we hit those today. We talk about stress and the damage that it can really cause the brain, but also ways to reduce stress with things like yoga and meditation, even journaling. Then we talked a bit about depression and also loneliness. We're hearing more and more about loneliness being an epidemic in our country, which it is. So we talked about how both of those things impact the brain and also things that we can do to reduce feelings of depression and loneliness. The older I get, the more I'm realizing the importance of keeping our brain healthy. We only have one brain and it has to last us for our entire lives and hopefully in good function. So many things that we're doing right now today will affect our brain either positively or negatively. So please listen to this episode to learn more about how you can care for your brain. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Anne. Hey, it's Steph, and welcome to the Straight Up with Steph podcast, where we have real discussions around health and life and just trying to be better at both. Hello, Miss Anne. How are you today?
Hey, Stephanie, it's great to be back. This is the only way that we can see each other, I think, is when we do podcasts together.
I
We're
know.
all
Well,
over.
maybe at a conference or something we'll see
I
each
hope,
other.
I hope soon. Yeah.
We talked about a bunch of stuff last time, like dementia risks and sleep and exercise and diet, but there's just so much more when it comes to brain health and taking care of our brain and other tips and tricks or whatever that I just had to have you back on. So I'm excited to
Thank
talk
you.
more about how to
Yeah.
take care of this little brain up here.
Sure. Sure. Yeah.
I want to start with stress because I have
Okay.
learned from you and other places how detrimental stress is to the brain, but how exactly does it impact the brain negatively?
In a lot of different ways. Let's take cortisol because everybody understands cortisol, right? It is associated elevated levels with shrinking of the hippocampus, which your hippocampus, it's the critical area for memory and for learning. It's kind of interesting too about this hippocampus. It has a really important regulatory role in a feedback loop that's actually governing the cortisol release. So it's kind of an indirect process, but the hippocampus communicates with something called the hypothalamus, and that influences our adrenal glands. And you think about the adrenal glands with cortisol and elevating our cortisol levels. But there's different chemical signals that try to help lower those cholesterol levels. So it's kind of interesting that excess cortisol is going to damage the area that's trying to help us regulate, perhaps, our cortisol level. We also know that it disrupts the prefrontal cortex. If you think about with kids, if you've had a teenager, the prefrontal cortex does not finish forming or getting all solidified until they're 25. So that's why a lot of teenagers and college kids are idiots, perhaps, at certain times. But the prefrontal cortex is where we're going to do our executive function, like decision making, attention, and problem solving. We know that cortisol disrupts that area. It
Mm.
also disrupts the brain's only source of fuel, which is glucose. It needs glucose to run efficiently, and it interferes with the function of neurotransmitters, which is this getting information from here to there, and can eventually actually kill neurons by something in the creation of free radicals. We know what that is, oxidative stress. So high cortisol can damage all those areas. But what I think about when I think about a one-hit wonder when it comes to the damage in all of those areas, it sounds silly, but nutrition can counteract all of those. What nutrition's going to do, it's going to restore and stabilize the brain's supply of glucose. And remember this, when I'm talking about glucose, I'm not talking about chocolate chip cookies. I'm not talking about desserts and things like that. We're
Darn.
talking about getting our glucose from vegetables, some fruits. Like turnips is 76% glucose to be
Hmm.
used the proper way in the brain. We have apricots at about 52%, red beets, which is a delightful superfood. So you can get the glucose that you need in the brain. But when I talked about nutrition counteracting the other ones too, including free radicals. So when we have good antioxidants and some of the fruits and things that we eat, it's going to counteract that. And then also the good food is going to help nourish our neurotransmitters. So this is getting information from here to there to recover your memory. There's another part to stress impacting your health at a deeper level, and that is in a level all the way down to our DNA. Whether your stress is perceived, whether it's actual chronic stress, it's associated with, as I said, the oxidative stress. In that also, it lowers something called telomerase and shorter telomeres. This sounds all crazy with DNA, but telomeres is the protective cap. It's the end of your chromosomes. They shorten with every cell division. Hello, life. It's like your biological clock. When they're super short, cells can do something called senesce, that's aging. They undergo apoptosis, which is cell death. That can contribute to premature aging, immune decline, all the age-related diseases. Stress impacts that. That telomerase that is keeping those end of those caps healthy, that telomerase, this enzyme that helps those stay healthy, tends to be suppressed with stress. Women that have higher level of perceived stress, their telomeres are shorter, and they are equivalent, women that are under high stress, to 1 decade of additional aging. What we know when I talked about nutrition counteracting, there's lots of great research about the Mediterranean diet specifically for women. We know that women on a Mediterranean diet have better telomeres. They have longer strands. So that's really important for women through your your aging, all the way into postmenopausal, that we keep our nutrition to kind of counteract some of our stress could be really helpful.
If they get short, can they lengthen, or is it kind of like once it's gone, it's gone?
Well, we're all going to have the shrinking of that in this aging process
Okay.
because they're all going to get, I mean, that's just part of aging. But the
Okay.
telomerase keeps those protective caps. I don't know if you could replicate that and make them longer. I'm not saying that if you've lost a lot of that to give up when you're in your 70s and
Yeah.
80s. I think if we could keep telomeres really long, we would be living to what, 150,
Yeah.
200 years old, right? That we would have reduced the aging process. I don't know if scientifically there is a way to
Okay.
actually make them longer. And then those are all the negatives, right? With stress. That's what we all live with to some degree, whether it's home, work, just all the personal things that we go through. People talk about stress management a lot. I'm going to go get a pedicure. I'm going to go shopping. I'm going to do all those things. And I don't necessarily know that that's really stress management. That
People call
goes,
that self-care too, and I'm like, "Is that self-care?" I don't think a bubble bath is like self-care. It's
but,
deeper than
but I
that.
do think that some of that, if that gets you to not think or to relax, there's got to be
Yeah.
a benefit there. But to be a little bit more productive, Tai Chi has shown great results in stress management. Journaling, even giving
Mm.
somebody a hug, being in silence, humming is a way, which this sounds really funny. When I was a kid, my dentist used to hum all the time. It was old school. I didn't pipe in music and he just hummed all the time.
Mhm.
But humming actually has some benefits. Not that every dentist or hygienist needs to start humming, but it can increase oxygen into our cells. It lowers blood pressure. It's going to lower your heart rate. It can also increase levels of melatonin, what's going to help you sleep, right? We need
Mhm.
the melatonin for us to get to sleep. It also releases endorphins. It could act as a natural pain reliever. So, doing a little bit of humming, working out in your garden are probably a great idea.
I did not know that about humming. That is so funny because that you say that. My last flight, the guy next to me was humming the entire time, just not loud, but loud enough that I could hear it. And I typically get irritated easily with little things like that. And so
Right.
now I'm going to be like, okay, he's like lowering his stress. Stephanie, like, chill
Well, and
out.
it might have been some sort of self-regulation. There's
Maybe.
actually a
Yeah.
book, I remember the cover, it's purple and yellow, and it talks about humming. I mean, it's a whole huge book
Hmm.
talking about all of the health benefits. So,
That's
it's not a
interesting.
bunch of crazy you stuff. It actually
Yeah,
does
there's like
have some
science behind it.
scientific evidence to it.
Yeah. So I want to talk about some other ways that we can manage our stress because that's very important. But something that you and I were talking about just a few minutes ago was this whole issue of multitasking. Let me
Okay.
just paint a picture for you. I was taking a webinar. Actually, do you know Michelle Galloway?
Uh-huh.
She
Uh-huh. Mhm.
okay, she's been on this podcast too, but I was watching or listening to a webinar she was doing on AI. It was on my computer. My computer was on my kitchen countertop. I was baking. I was like, stirring some stuff together. And also, while I was waiting for the baking to set, I was listening to her podcast and I also did some sets of some lifting in my living room. It was insane. And I was just like, Stephanie, what do you think you're doing here? It didn't feel good to me that I was doing all of this at one time. I wasn't engaged with Michelle. I mean, I
Nope.
was kind of listening, but not really. And then you were like, this is something we should talk about. And so, anyway, can you please tell us the issue with multitasking?
You did none of it well. So
Yeah,
you didn't
exactly.
listen to her. You could have made an error in your baking. And
Yep.
I wouldn't say that your lifting was purposeful. And it's really hard when we talk about multitasking because if you're in dentistry, in an operatory, you are listening for the doctor's gloves to pop off. We're getting messages on our computer when we're in the middle of trying to do work. There's 7 million things that we're doing in our
Yeah.
careers, right? I'll get forward in a minute about the brain, but when I think about this as somebody working in the operatory, if you compare dentist to hygienist, many dentists that I've worked for, when they are in an intricate procedure, a surgery, an implant, a something, you do not engage them behind them. You leave them alone so that
Hmm.
they can focus and get their work done. They're on the right track. When you are with your patient, when you are doing whatever you're doing, therapy, I don't know, laser, all the things that you're doing, that is what you focus on. Yappy can wait. Your front office might not like that, but that we really have to dial it down to do one task at a time. Now, let's
Yeah.
talk about what that is actually doing, the negative effects. It will directly affect your short term memory. So, what you're doing is your working memory, where you're trying to remember what Michelle is saying. That scratch pad for managing and focusing on key information is gone because you're doing all these different things and you're not able to work on that working memory. It inhibits creative thinking because multitasking does drive anxiety. It reduces your focus, and we are living in, we have made every device in the world so that we can do texting and reading an email at the same time as I'm listening to a podcast.
Yeah.
And we all do it. It is supposed to be for productive lives. I'm not a therapist, I'm not in this world, but I don't think that it's productive. The state of flow, when I talked about the dentist focusing on whatever surgery that they're doing, that flow, and if you are a creator at home, I make PowerPoint presentations. When I'm in the zone, is what I like to call it, nothing is going to disrupt me, and I'm going to get that PowerPoint done in a fraction of the time
Mm.
as opposed to being distracted here looking at this. You and I talked about it. My phone, when a text comes in, I don't have it pinging, but I can see the light switch on my phone, which takes me out of that flow. We
Yeah.
know hands down it decreases productivity and accuracy, and it temporarily lowers your IQ, and it can be an average of 10 points. Then it will also, we're multitasking during the day. Right now, we're all going to do this. Last night, it's funny that you talked about that. I had 2 webinar going at the same time for about 15 minutes. Really? Well, what was I doing? I
I was
mean,
like,
that
what
was
do we think we're
crazy.
doing? You
I
know?
don't know. Well, one, I had to have responsibilities. I had to be on one and I had to finish up another thing. But
Yeah.
nonetheless, when we're doing this during the day, you're amping up your anxiety, right? And then what is it going to affect later? It will affect your sleep. And now we're in this bad loop once again. So that anxiety, that multitasking is going to affect you at nighttime and all the things that you did during the day.
I'm, like, getting stressed just thinking about it,
I know.
actually.
Well, and we know how sleep is important. I think we talked about this before
We
because
did,
that's where
yeah.
we consolidate what few memories you might have gotten today because your short-term memory was jacked from the multitasking. It's hard. I'm going to tell you that I never thought that I was ADD, ADHD, and I don't throw those terms around lightly. I think you can lean into that
Yeah.
tendency when you're doing too many things at the same time.
100%. I mean, over this last year, I mean, I'm in perimenopause, so that's a whole other thing. But
It
I'm
is.
like, do I have ADHD? Like, have I had that for my whole life? I don't know. But even last night, I was, okay, quote unquote, cooking dinner because I wasn't really paying attention to what I was doing, checking emails, trying to listen to what my boyfriend was telling me. And I completely messed up the order of how I was supposed to be cooking things. And I had to start
Absolutely.
over.
Well, you weren't paying attention to
No, and he's
anything
like, "You
that you
need
were
to put your
doing.
phone down, like, I'll stop talking and just focus on what you're doing."
That goes back to food too, is at what point do we actually enjoy our food? Many of us don't sit at a table to eat our food. We're on our devices. It's not even an enjoyable entity anymore. You're not
Yeah.
really paying attention to it. You're focused on something else.
It's like we're just trying to rush through everything to move
Mm.
on to the next thing, and there's no savoring or enjoying anything, you know?
Right.
But, okay, so now that we're all nice and stressed out, what
Yeah.
are some ways that we can lower stress that are, like, scientifically proven?
Yoga is probably one of the best things you can do for your
Is
brain.
it?
And this isn't just crazy. I can remember my son when he was in a pre-K program, they did yoga with the kids. And we have a lot of people that have different ideas about what yoga is. It really doesn't
Mhm.
have a full definition. What you could universally wrap it all into is a grouping of your mind, your body, and your spirit. Whatever your spirit is, it doesn't have to have a religious connotation. It's just breath control, posture, meditation, something wrapped all together. So you could do that in a lot of different ways, whether you do a formal class, have hot yoga, kundalini yoga, you have all these different yoga forms. But what does the research say? Back in 2014, it was a lovely study when they were comparing regular exercise to yoga. When they tamped it all down, they found that yoga is kind of like weightlifting for the brain. So, what they found is that those people that were in yoga practices had better executive function, they had better working memory, they had less inflammatory cytokines, they had lower interleukins, they had lower tumor necrosis factor alpha as well. So, physical exercise is very important. And I would say that there's many yogas that are physical exercise.
Mhm.
Some people like to divide those into two when you can do yoga that doesn't have to be intense and still get the benefits from that. So we have yoga now in the senior population. It is a huge influence, especially in assisted living facilities, to the best of their ability, right? I years ago got involved with the Alzheimer's Research and Prevention Foundation, and Dr. Dharma Singh has a lot of research about yoga. It's a yoga philosophy, I guess, of it's called Curtain Kriya. It's really a meditation. It's rooted in Kundalini yoga. You have chanting, so you're going to have mantras, you're going to have finger movements. And the chanting is really just sa ta na ma. It's not like a bunch of crazy chanting, right?
Yeah.
You're going to do finger movements. We call those mudras. And it's a focused breathing. It's kind of holistic mind body practice. It's only 12 minutes a day. It supports cognitive health. There's tons of research about it. It activates your conscious, your subconscious, your unconscious. In 2017, it was published in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease. It is important for attention, verbal memory, and it had great psychological outcomes for older adults. This has been studied. And like I said, it's only 12 minutes a day. You don't have to be in some crazy position. You could do it sitting on the couch. It is not all your downward dog and things like that, but it's a modified version of both yoga and meditation together.
I think that that's where we get stuck too, is like overcomplicating these things and like
I
thinking we
do.
need equipment or we have to go somewhere or we have to like be perfect. And then it's like, forget it. I'm not going to do it, but
Yep.
that sounds pretty simple.
There was it's yoga by Adrienne. It's Adrienne, I almost said her name was Irene. She does this thing once a year where she'll do 5-minute little yoga things. I think that's where everybody should just start.
Hmm.
5 or 10 minutes is better than nothing. You could just sit on your own floor. If you have a dog, it's always very difficult. But I am similar to you. I want it to be this big production of something, and then nothing ever gets done.
It's just becoming very apparent to me that this is something that I personally need to work on because my brain does not feel how it used to. And I'm only 42. And it's like, okay, I need to rein it in, do some meditation or something, or stop with the multitasking. I don't know. Because what you said is right. I'm not doing any of those things well. And that probably translates to my business too.
Your generation, it's really difficult because there's so many things that you're doing. You're a business owner. You are doing the hustle. Well, the nature of doing a hustle is doing a lot of different things,
Yeah.
right? Maybe it might be to the detriment of yourself and all of us, to ourselves and our health. Slowing down for just 10 or 15 minutes a day and really stopping, putting the phone away, turning it off, all of that. And then yoga goes into meditation. That is something that I really focused on last year. I lost a little bit of it this year and have to go back to it again. Just 5 or 10 minutes of meditation is so important. It
Hmm.
strengthens your memory. It's going to decrease your anxiety. Inflammation is going to be decreased. There's measurable effects on your gray matter, which is the biggest part of your brain. The prefrontal cortex is healthier. Your amygdala, which is your throat punching area when you want to kill your coworkers, all your emotions are wrapped up in there. So that's going to dial you down. Even though when you're not meditating, it's going to last through in other parts of your day. It helps in
Wow.
cognitive function in so many different ways, processing, the stress relief. It also changes the entire structure of the brain. We know that people that meditate all the time, their brains do look different. Their quality of life is different. And what we have to remember in brain health is it's not just for you in prevention, but there are tens of millions of caregivers for people that have brain diseases. They need every bit of help that they can get. If they can do 10 minutes of something alone to quiet their own minds to try to be healthier and less stressed. We can't forget those in our patients. It's every family. These women are in this sandwich generation where they're taking care of their elders and they still have kids. And how many apps are out there for meditation? And a lot of them are free, or you could just turn on YouTube and they have little waves, nice ocean sounds where you can just sit there and try to close your eyes and get out of your own head.
Now, for someone who's not familiar with meditation, what does that look like? What is it? What are you doing?
I think meditation is just a slowing down. I mean, you could talk to all of the therapists about it, and everybody says, well, you're not thinking. Well, that's really not, I don't know how possible that really is that you're not thinking. I think that if you're in a really good practice of meditation, that's probably possible. But for all of us, what I think really works great, and I've done some study with Buteyko breathing, is that if you can just focus on that. So if you and I just sat here and I said, Stephanie, don't think about anything. You can't even look at me without not thinking about something, the
Mhm.
background, my whatever it is. But if you could close your eyes and just focus on the breath in and out of your nose, slow, fast, however it is, if you can feel the warmth on your nose, if that's what you can focus on without any outside distractions, I think that's a great start. To have people dump their entire consciousness is reaching a lot, and that's why people quit. But nonetheless, you can do a meditation for 5 minutes. There's programs that can help you do it. I think it's all individual. What's going to
Okay.
work for one person isn't going to work for another. I decorated one of my Christmas trees last night, and it was dark outside. My husband had already gone to bed. The dog was already in bed. I had no noise. I had nothing. I would say I was doing meditation.
Mm.
All it was a slow roll of doing something that I enjoyed. It was quiet. I didn't think about any of it really was kind of unconscious, I guess. So I think meditation can come in lots of different forms if we just look for it. Just like if you look for good things, you're going to find them.
So it's not, you don't have to dedicate an hour to your day and it
Oh,
doesn't have to be dead
who could?
quiet and okay. Yeah. But you just saying like 10 or 12 or 14 minutes a day, like I can do that. If you just frame it like that, it's like, of course I have that time in my day if that's going to help my brain. But I think the word meditation, at least for me, it's intimidating. And I'm like, I can't do that. I don't have time for that. But I do have
No.
10 minutes to just sit there and focus on my breath.
I think we also have 10 minutes in the morning when we wake up. We all have our rituals. You're going to go start the coffee. You're going to go work out. You're going to let your dog out or whatever. You get the kids up. If you just get up for 10 minutes, don't touch your phone. Don't do
Yeah.
anything. If you happen to live whatever climate, if you just sit outside, look at some trees, that's an element of meditation where your day hasn't started yet. You're awake, but you're slow. You're just absorbing where you are. I had done that for a while, just leaving everything aside. Grabbing the phone first thing in the morning is
It's a kiss of
insanity.
death, man. It, like, is not a great setup for a good day,
No, it's not
but
if we
we
tell.
do it. I do it. I'm like, "I shouldn't be doing this, but I'm doing it," and it's like the days that I consciously don't pick up my phone and do my routine, and I pick up my phone later, those days are markedly better than the ones that
Yep.
I pick up my phone before I even get out of bed.
Yep. I think that's a form of meditation is just doing that.
So we talked last time about Alzheimer's and dementia
Yep.
specifically, but we didn't talk too much about depression. But I know that that is a risk factor for Alzheimer's,
It
correct?
is. It is. And they say it in particular in late life, even though early life, it makes a difference too. So we've heard all sorts of people with a history of it when it's untreated, when it's treated back and forth. I will say this is that when depression, if that's the diagnosis, is treated, you are way better on the other side of this. We call these medical interventions. When you look at risk factors for Alzheimer's disease, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure. I'm treating my high blood pressure. I am on some sort of metformin and I am treating my depression. My risk has just dropped. That's a medical intervention. So, people that do have depressive episodes, they're in cognitive behavioral therapy, they're on medication, whatever they're doing, it's not to say that everybody that's had depressive episodes are going to have this increased risk, right? It's when we go with anything when things are untreated. But we do know in a history of depression, it can be 1.5 to 2 times higher risk. When we're depressed, there is evidence about the gray matter that I talked about before in areas like the hippocampus, that's our learning and memory, prefrontal cortex, higher level thinking and planning has shrunk. Okay. I'm going to mention the other research. People that have severe depression, they tend to have higher gray matter, which is crazy. I just told you that it was
Yeah.
smaller. And then when it's this severe depression. So what that tells me is what is severe, what is regular depression. I think that the jury is still out with this gray matter. But we do know that depression and inflammation go together, but it's chicken and egg.
Hmm.
Did the inflammation lead to the depression or did the depression lead to the inflammation? And that's what's really tough for them to tease out. Experts aren't really sure. People that have major depressive episodes have higher levels of proteins, certain chemicals that are linked to brain inflammation. It increases depression in and of itself, increases oxidative stress. The brain is the most vulnerable to oxidative stress. It's the highly metabolic part of our bodies. So oxidative stress is going to affect it. We know that it can promote those plaques and tangles that we talk about with Alzheimer's disease. 50 and older, that's where, and I don't consider that old age anymore in any way, shape, or form. I just
Me
call that
either.
regular life, right? There is a relationship between depression after 50 and vascular dementia. So that's different than Alzheimer's disease. almost twice as likely. Vascular dementia has to do with cardiovascular health. So it's going to be our vessels in our brain are having a malfunction. Now, you can have Alzheimer's and vascular dementia,
Mm.
but in that same research, when they looked at the Alzheimer's patients as compared, these are compared to non-depressed peers, 65% increased risk. Now, what are we going to tease out of that? Because does a depressed individual go to the gym? Do they eat well? All of those other, they are isolated, they're lonely often. So it's really hard. Where does that all come into play? Especially when you talk about cardiovascular health, which is a risk factor for vascular and Alzheimer's disease.
Hmm.
So some of this research is really hard. Is it because of some of these other things that then led to some of those other risk factors? Think about stress for a minute. Stress increases hypertension, obesity, type 2 diabetes. All of those are risk factors for Alzheimer's disease. So you're getting it from not just the cortisol, you're getting it from other areas. Same thing with depression. They're probably not taking care of themselves if it's untreated, right?
So, since all of those things are so obviously closely connected, it would go to show that maybe working on one, like maybe for someone to up their nutrition or work on their exercise or something, is probably going to slowly start to improve all of those other things too. And then maybe it can be like a positive snowball to where they start making even more changes.
Of course. And what we also know is in depression, even though people say we hear the whole thing when you're depressed, all they want to do is sleep. A lot of people that are depressed can't sleep. And
Hmm.
we know that sleep is really critical to help us with our emotions, especially that REM sleep. We might have talked about that last time.
Yeah, we
So
did.
it's kind of like your emotional first aid. If a depressed individual is having trouble sleeping, they're not getting the free therapy that our brains just automatically do for us. All kind of rolls in together. When we have elderly patients, we have elderly family members, they're really isolated oftentimes, and we ignore. Older people can be depressed, right? And we don't necessarily pay attention to that. There is some staggering statistics about elderly suicide. It is more common than you think, and it is across the board very much ignored. It accounts for about 18% of all suicides is in an
Holy
elderly
cow.
population.
That makes me
And it's
so
some
sad.
absolutely. And it's something that we don't talk about, we don't address. A lot of them live alone. You know, they come to their doctor's appointments, their dental appointments, they see the guy at the grocery store, but we wouldn't know that they're depressed. And the Alzheimer's patients as well, they suffer, people with cognitive decline with depression. So they've now packed that on together. They've already got the disease now that they've got as a symptom of that disease. So let's talk about how we're going to fix it.
Yeah.
Antidepressants are beautiful. It works on chemicals in your brain. It helps us with stress and our emotions. I'm not trying to push drugs on anyone, but people that are having episodes and have significant problems, that is just like I have A1C issues or I'm a cardiac patient or whatever. I'm going to take my metformin and my lisinopril, and I'm going to take my antidepressants for my brain. Also, it's real important that we all start to look a little bit more at cognitive behavioral therapy, especially for poor sleep, and also in patients that might have depression. We know that it helps, that therapy helps with neuroplasticity. So you can actually change the way your brain is wired a little bit to help you
Hmm.
through those depressive episodes. It isn't easy. We're in a crazy world now.
It is
And
crazy. And you mentioned loneliness too. And
yeah,
I've heard here and there on podcasts that like loneliness is an epidemic right now. I mean, is that since COVID? Did that kind of shine a light on the whole loneliness thing?
well, yeah, and they have a lot of research about COVID. It kind of amplified our social isolation. We saw what that did to the older population, the lockdowns, the physical distancing. A lot of people can't even psychologically still get out of some of that. But I mean,
Yeah.
it's our whole life. We have a resilience on digital communication, right? There's less face to face interactions. You and I rarely see each other. We're face to face. I work in an office. I am not face to face with anyone unless somebody does a Zoom call. And that's work and it's not real. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes I go out to dinner, but it is very superficial connections. We have a modern lifestyle. that is prioritizing individualism over community. We're going to have you do your work separately. Might have a meeting talking about your work individually, but it's not working necessarily as together.
Hmm.
Older adults face loneliness because of retirement. They can't get around, mobility issues. They lose their significant other. We are in impersonalized cities oftentimes when we're in a big city. I live in Houston. I happen to live in a neighborhood. If I see my neighbors who go to work at 8 o'clock and come home at 5 or 6, and then they take care of their kids, I'm really lucky. I live at a cul-de-sac. We do get outside some, but we have a very busy lifestyle. Our cities are not as personal. It can really increase feelings of disconnection. Let's look on the other side of loneliness. There is some data out there. Well, before we get to the other side of the positive, loneliness and smoking 15 cigarettes a day are equal to detriments of health. You almost
Wow.
wish that your kid smokes as opposed to being lonely, because the loneliness then can lead into depression, and that's tough to shake sometimes. You can get them to quit smoking. Now, I'm not
Yeah.
suggesting that every child smokes, but I'm just
I
saying
get
is
your point,
now,
though.
yeah, absolutely. That loneliness is an epidemic. The World Health Organization is totally on this, as the Surgeon General said that it's a public health crisis. What are we going to do about it? Social engagement, and how do we actually do that? It's getting back into communities, it's group activities, it's communing with nature even. If you're an introvert, you can still not be lonely, right? You could be with a whole group of people and be lonely as
Yes.
heck,
Yep.
right? You could be an introvert and not be lonely at all, but be with a group of people. So any personality can still enjoy community activities. It was funny. I was just talking to my sister a little bit ago. I want to take a calligraphy class. Yeah, I can do it online. No problem. I could download whatever and buy the stuff. I want to go to a place. I
Yeah.
want to be with a community of people where we're going to do that. And hopefully, maybe we're going to come around to doing more like that and less engagement online. And with our older population, that's just going to take a lot of work. Your own family member, check on your neighbors. We've seen some crazy things in dentistry lately. We need to check on
Yeah.
our coworkers. They might seem all happy on the outside, but they can be incredibly lonely on the inside.
I feel like the loneliness, yes, I mean, it can get into depression real quick. I've had periods of depression in my life, and when you're in it, it's very hard to see a way out, and you just feel like you're trapped. So, what could someone do if they're lonely and depressed? Is it just like really forcing themselves to get out and be with people?
I would dare not say that. And forcing somebody depends upon where their level, right, of
Yeah.
depression is. I would hope everyone has a someone,
Yeah.
one person, one, just one. And I could guarantee that one person, if you were to truly share, is going to care. I have to believe in my heart that everybody has someone. We might not have parents, we might not have a partner, but we have somebody, whether it's a coworker, someone that you can share that with.
Yeah.
Even taking a walk, I notice this with myself because I walk in the woods. Obviously, that's isolated, but sometimes I walk in the neighborhood. There's a lot of things that are happening with that. Getting fresh air, I'm looking at the trees and all that. But when I go when people are outside, there's an element of joy to that,
Yeah.
of less lonely. I'm not talking to them. They're across the driveway. Their kids are riding bikes. But to look at some of those things as special, there's the whole gratitude thing, counting our blessings. People go through periods, though, that it's bad. Things
Yeah.
aren't going well, whether it's illness or jobs and all of that. But I do think that there has to be one person. There has to be.
Yeah.
Um, there are phone numbers to call in
Mhm.
situations that are very important and do great work. I just think it's a slow process for people to come out of that loneliness. There
Yeah.
is a part of that, though, that not for somebody that's depressed, but loneliness, the isolation that goes with that. We have to take some responsibility for that. We have to join the world. In the dental community, for many years, and still some might call it boundaries. I've been on the periphery, however you want to wrap that around it. What you have to check yourself with that is I'm not isolating myself. Those are choices that I'm making. So that doesn't necessarily mean that's loneliness. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's just kind of being clear on, I don't know, what your definitions of those things are, I guess.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And then it's really sad to me, as we all know, we've all gone through struggles. That's when you turn within and you
yeah.
don't want to talk to people. You don't want to share things. And then that goes on and on and on. I really would encourage everyone to talk to at least have some one person.
Someone, yeah. Even if it's a phone number, like what you mentioned, there are
Yeah.
a lot of resources out there. And I think just remembering all of these things like stress and the multitasking and loneliness and depression, all of those can have a significant impact on our future brain health. It's not just like what's happening right now. We have to
Right.
think about our brain, and we only have one brain, and it's got to last us a long time.
Yeah, and you can change your brain. It's very malleable. It's kind of like Play-Doh. You can learn good behaviors, unlearn bad behaviors. It'll morph, it'll change for you. So just because you had a bout of this, or this happened when I was 20, 30, 40, 50, there's always changes that you can make now. I would just hope that everybody maybe has an opportunity to just get outside and just be and slow down. And the multitasking, Stephanie, and that's what we do. How can you tell a provider you can't multitask? Well, you'd be fired. Try to tease out moments of just flow and focus.
Like, as a creator, I know you are and I am too. I get the best ideas when I'm in the shower or walking on the treadmill, and it's because I'm not filling my brain with, like, 10
It's your,
things I'm
it's,
doing. Like, I have space to think about that stuff.
yeah, it's all the
Um,
creativity for sure.
yeah, it's so important, gosh. I mean, I bet I'm gonna ask you to come on again because you just have so much knowledge, seriously, in that big o you must have a huge, like, hippocampus in your brain. So, if somebody wants to reach out to you or connect with you, what's the best place for that?
You could go to my website, just put my middle initial in it. So it's annorice.com, or that's an email to annorice@gmail.com. And all of my everything is just put the middle initial, or you're gonna get the vampire books
I
for
know,
the
I'm
other
like, "Are you
Anne
related?
Rice.
Is there any relation there?"
No, but I had as much gray hair as her. We just don't see that regularly.
Oh,
So,
that's funny.
um,
Yeah, I'll make sure to put all of your contact information in the show notes,
thanks.
and I'll also link that last episode that we did together. I mean, there's so much information there too.
It's
But
always
thank you
fun.
I
Yeah.
have such a good time with you, Anne, seriously. I was thinking about this when you were talking. You are one of those people that when I talk to you, I feel better, and not
Whoa.
everyone is like that. So I just really wanna thank you.
Okay, that is probably I will hold on to that now for weeks. That makes me feel good. That's what you
Yeah.
want in the world. Thank you.
You're welcome, and I mean it. I don't have a whole lot of people that I can say that about, but I definitely mean it with you. So,
It's
thank you.
sweet.
And thank you everyone for listening, and we will see you next time.
Bye.